So excited that the new season has started.
You do love yourself.
I love me some British panel comedy shows. I fucking do. Just jokers making jokes about shit, having a laugh. Pop your can.
I was trying to do it before you started recording.
It's in the cold open, and the can is cold, and now it is open.
What is it?
This brand new episode of Soon to Be a Major Motion Podcast, the podcast where we watch movies that are based on books and read books that were turned into movies. I am Billy Beck.
I am Cody Beck.
Cody! How you been?
Can't complain. Stuff. That's all I got.
I mean, when did we last record? Did that happen since before the last recording? It did. I fulfilled a 30-year-old dream and made true a 20 or an 18-year-old pact this weekend.
Tell us about it.
The summer of 1996, I was a wee lad of 6 years old, and I heard about this thing that was coming to the United States of America called the Olympic Games, and that's where it's all begun. And the fact that I don't have any sports podcasts, considering how many episodes of this open with me talking about sports, is kind of ridiculous at this point.
Because all of your friends are fucking nerds and you're a jock and you just hit it successfully.
Yep, that's exactly it. So, summer 96, learned about the Olympics. Always wanted to go. Obviously couldn't that year because I was 6 years old, even though it was in Atlanta on the East Coast.
Well, it's probably for the best you didn't go.
I doubt I would have been in that park. So I've always wanted to go to an Olympic Games. And I shared this dream with a friend I met in high school who joined me when we watched the 2008 Beijing opening ceremony together. And on my parents' couch that night, we agreed one day we're going to go to an Olympics. And then they announced LA 28, where we live.
There was no time that passed in between those two things.
And Tracy and I talked about it and went, that's going to be it. And this past Friday, I got my ticket allocation window. Got in there, got my 12 allocated tickets, 10 of which at the barest $28 price. All of which is the opening week of the games. And Tracy's going to come out here, and we're going to go to the fucking Olympics. Going to see some men's handball. Going to see some women's cricket. Some women's rugby, which I'm very excited for. Some beach volleyball. Women's basketball. And one medal event in athletics. I believe it's the 400-meter mixed relay is the day we're going to be there. But we're going to see, I think there's also hammer throw, yeah? Mm-hmm. Shot put or hammer throw, javelin, one of the trunchbulls, and I think maybe one of the jumps as well. So, I'm really, really, really looking forward to this event that's more than 2 years away.
Yes. I'm genuinely very thrilled for you, and I am extra excited that Tracy is taking the bullet for me.
Yep. If anything happens, that second ticket's yours, babe.
I know, and I will go.
You will acquiesce.
I will, yep.
I'm more likely to get you on the subway at 7 a.m. than her.
That's still not a very high percentage chance. The last time I was on the subway at 7 a.m. was to go to jury duty.
Ew.
Yeah.
But no, that's how I've been.
Just casually fulfilling a
Just casually, just
dream.
this thing that I've wanted to do all of my life, essentially, I get to do.
So, there was another Olympics in the U.S.
2002 Salt Lake.
Why didn't...
My parents weren't going to spend that much money and take me out of school for a week to go to the Olympics.
Okay, that's fair,
Especially not the Winter Olympics.
That's fair,
Because I was in fucking Utah, too. We didn't travel when I was that age.
That's fair, I guess. I was just thinking that,
Vancouver 2010 was more likely. But even then, I was in college. I'm not taking that much time off of school to go to the Olympics. And there hasn't been a Summer Games in this hemisphere except for Rio, which is, not in this hemisphere. Or it's in this hemisphere, but not in this hemisphere because it's south of the equator. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it's still not gonna fucking happen.
Yeah.
But, Beijing has had 2 games since the last time the U.S. has had anything.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I'm excited. I'm very excited.
I am genuinely thrilled for you. And I'm also excited to get to spend time with Tracy. Because her wedding was
just the best.
So much fun.
She's the tits. We met, would have been my senior year of high school, is probably when we became friends. But we probably met the year before because I knew her older sisters. But no, she's good people. She's good people.
We'll have to find some more Olympic books in there.
Dude, the amount of looking I've done.
Maybe they'll write some more. Maybe Simone Biles will have a biography by then.
That they'll have made into a movie?
Sure.
All right.
You just watch 100 seasons of your documentary.
My 100 years of Olympic history.
Yes. I'm still so happy I managed to grab that for you.
Unbelievable. That's like the keystone of my collection.
Yes. Literally everything else is sitting on it because it's a box.
But you know what else is in the Criterion collection?
What else?
There's a little film by an old friend of ours, Marty Scadardi himself, that is based on a novel by Nikos Kazantzakis. Mm-hmm. And the novel and film are both titled The Last Temptation of Christ. And since Easter just passed, I thought it would be a good time to tackle this out of the ordinary for us novel and film.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment.
Now, normally, I would ask you when you first heard of The Last Temptation of Christ. But I'm pretty sure the answer is when I watched it a few years ago for the first time.
Yes, that is correct.
And if you asked me, I would say I read something about the film negative getting fried in the Moroccan sun on the last shot of the movie, but the take was so good that he kept it in there. You know, I think I read that on like a cracked article back in the day.
If it were not you watching the movie, it would have been in the build-up to The Passion of the Christ. Because they would have talked about the controversial Christ movies.
Oh, they may have.
And it would have literally just been a passing mention.
Yeah. So instead of asking you when you first came to know this, Cody, when did you first hear the story of Jesus?
Oh, God.
I say that tongue in cheek, knowing full well that we're white Americans. I don't remember the first time I heard the story of Jesus. You probably don't either. But were you, and you can answer this however in depth you choose. What was your religious upbringing related to the story of Jesus growing up?
We were, what's that term for, it's like semi-derogatory.
Creaster?
Yes, we were creasters for a lot of my childhood.
Christmas and Easter, baby.
Yeah. We went to Christmas Eve service, and we went to Easter service, and occasionally we would go on random other days, but it was never consistent.
I feel like your mom would drag you on Mother's Day just to feel important for a day.
You're actually right. I think it was the days we would go would be Mother's Day, Father's Day, and Veterans Day.
I hate how I figured that out.
Yeah.
Just days where your mom can hype herself up.
Yeah, and also just holiday adjacent days. Mm-hmm. And then it started becoming more consistent once I was of the age for confirmation. So between 10 and 12 we started going more regularly, and I started getting involved in church, and it wasn't out of any sense of religious leaning or anything. It was, this is what you do. You get involved in the church, and that's how you give back to your community. So I did the acolyte thing. And that's honestly why we started going more consistently, because the church that I went to growing up was a UCC.
It's United Christian Church? Is that what it is?
United Church of Christ.
Church of Christ, okay.
Yeah.
I think some of my family's UCC.
Yeah, it's the gentlest end of evangelical.
Because there's still fucking leadership, it's not independent. We'll get to it.
Yeah, so basically, I was the only person of that age, roughly, in the church for a while. So they were just like, hey, do you want to be acolyte every fucking week? So for probably about 4 years, I was the only consistent person. I was also doing choir. And for a while, I was the only young choir member. We did handbell choir, and my mom started coming in. And again, it was not out of any sort of religious leaning or anything like that. The closest I know I'm jumping around a little bit here, but I think honestly what happened is my mom's sister passed away unexpectedly when I was 8 years old. And that was kind of when we started leaning into going to church more. And I think that was just because my mom had like the tiniest inkling of conscience and started wanting to assuage that. And so we went back to church. And then my best friend in 7th grade came from a Christian school and her family was deeply religious. And they went to one of them newfangled evangelical churches. And this was like, this would have been mid-aughts. So it's not, when I say evangelical, it's not as bad as it is now. But it was like a church filled with young people and people my age. And I started going on my own to this church with her family. And then eventually my parents started coming. And once I hit my junior year of high school, I kind of stopped going as much and like slowly fell out of it. And then we met in college and I started going to church with you and your family.
Which I guess I should...
You should, yeah.
I'll take it from here.
Yep. Go right ahead.
So my religious upbringing, first couple years of my life were Baptist church.
Oh boy.
Which the building still stands, and the last I heard it was one of those Korean churches. But it was a Baptist church. I barely remember going at that age. We would do occasional guest visits at that church, maybe once or twice a year later in life, but I don't remember any of it from my childhood because we moved to a different church that was one of those standalone, independent, evangelical churches. And I'm going to be as vague as I can be because I don't want to blow up anybody's spot, including my own.
To protect the guilty?
Well... Anyway, so until 6th grade, I went every Sunday, usually twice. We'd go in the morning for Sunday school, and then the main service, which until high school was just more Sunday school, and then go home, lunch, have a nap, back to church for night service, Sunday nights, 6:30, and occasionally a little early for choir practice or something like that, for children's choir, whatnot. When I got to high school, or when I got to middle school, that's when youth group became a thing. So from 6th grade till my senior year, and then for periods, like for summers in college, I was going to church 3 times a week.
I'm surprised it's only 3 times.
Sometimes it was more, because that youth group included a lot of events, and things like lock-ins, and outings, picnics, trips, hiking trips, and then also the more, as I grow older and more separate from that upbringing, more insidious things like missions trips. I look back in horror at some of the things we just said when we were in Thailand teaching Bible. We also did weird things like persecuted Christian night.
Oh, yep. I remember those.
Which was an all-nighter in which we all pretended to be Christians in countries where that's not allowed.
Like China? China was the big one.
China was the big one. And it was like educational activities, like draw a map of the world. All right, where are these countries? And these are the countries you can't say God in. and then everyone would sleep on, sleeping bags in the gym. And at 3 a.m. they would come in with fake guns and wake us up and move us to rooms. And then in the morning we'd get breakfast. And then go home, and we learned something. Did
you ever do the 30-hour famine?
I did not take part in 30-hour famine. I knew people who did.
ED Light, baby!
Yup. But that also included things like Creation Fest, which was a Christian rock festival in the middle of Pennsylvania. That was fucking huge for some reason.
Yeah, didn't we discover in college that we were there at the same time?
No, you went the year before me. Because I think Reliant K played your year.
Yes.
But their bus broke down my year.
Yes, because I think their bus caught fire my year.
But I still remember that opening night lineup. Flyleaf, Skillet, and Switchfoot. Fucking rad as hell night.
Yeah.
And then all 3 members of DC Talk were there, and there was a special guest lined up for like the final night, basically. And everyone was like, oh my god, DC Talk is gonna come. They're gonna come back, and they're gonna do a set. And it was Amy Grant. And when they announced Amy Grant, I swear to God, I saw a bunch of teenagers leave the pit and a bunch of wine moms approach the stage. So fucking funny. Amy Grant was my first concert, by the way. And if you don't know who any of those artists are, that's the world I lived in. Because I didn't know who contemporary secular artists were. But yeah, like we kept going to that church back in college. When I was in high school, my father got ordained and became a pastor at that church. He was not a regularly preaching pastor, but he did get a few weeks out of the year and would also guest spot at my childhood church, like I had said. Went off to college, started trying to separate from that world, and then right back into it the summer because there's nothing else to do in small town. And then moved out here, and we started going to some of the local churches, and then fell out when some shit went down.
Yeah.
Again, not to blow up anybody's spot, but like, it was a mixture of stuff happening to us and stuff happening with regards to a pastor at one of the churches, as well as some sermons I heard at the other church that I didn't sit well with me. Mm-hmm. And kind of haven't been in a while. But the reason I wanted to bring up that you were UCC growing up, mm-hmm. I'm an ex-evangelical is what I consider myself. I still pretty much believe in the story we're going to be talking about today, but not in such a way that I'm willing to hate people over it.
Yeah.
Because I actually care about what the dude was saying, and not like... I let me just say it this way. I think the words of Jesus are more important to a Christian than the words of a pastor who didn't know the guy. But yeah, the reason I wanted to bring up our, for lack of a better term, denominations is because this novel was written by a guy who is Greek Orthodox.
Yes.
The film was written by a guy who is Calvinist, and was directed by a guy who's Catholic. And the two of us talking, and the three people most in charge of creating what we're talking about tonight, all come from different sects of Christianity, different branches of the tree that is the Christian faith. And those branches all come from groups of people arguing and not coming to terms with decisions about stuff like Jesus. The topic of this novel is the kind of thing that would cause churches to splinter. So I think it's important to recognize that this is all coming together from people of different faiths, and I think all of us are going to agree it is a pretty good story. So before we get more into it, do you want to watch a trailer for the movie we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. In that case, unless you were going to add something, let's watch a trailer.
Martin Scorsese brings us a startling vision. An extraordinary story. The last temptation of Christ.
I love how that trailer was just the fucking Peter Gabriel score until that voiceover at the end and visuals. That's gonna play real well on this audio medium.
It sure will.
Enjoy getting demonetized on YouTube. Us.
Were we monetized?
No! That requires people to watch us on YouTube.
So, I actually have a question.
Yeah.
So, is the concept of the last temptation of Christ theological? Like, is it grounded in the scripture?
So, you know how I said that I haven't been to church in a while? Mm-hmm. I haven't cracked my Bible in a while either.
This is where we bring Mark!
So the idea of him being tempted on the cross, I don't believe... Yeah, Mark would do great on this episode, actually. I don't believe the temptation on the cross is based in Scripture as far as I remember. But I also came up in a church where we didn't read a lot of the Bible. We would read a verse, and then the pastor would, adapt it to his opinions on things. Mm-hmm. It became one of those places. The youth pastor, I don't recall doing that as much, but we were still learning the basics, And then Sunday school is just like, this is the basic story. So I did read the Bible cover to cover twice in my life, like as a concerted effort, which is saying a lot for me, not liking to read, especially not twice. But I don't recall anything. There is, in Scripture, Jesus being tempted, the desert.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it happening in the desert.
Which is also included in the story.
Because the reason I ask that is because this novel, the version that I'm reading, which is a 60s paperback, is 417 pages. The temptation in the title is in the last 50 pages. Not even 50.
Okay. So the film, it comes in late second act, like over 2 hours into a 2 hour, 45-minute movie.
Yeah. So, I guess I'm taking a really long-winded way of getting to why is this titled the way it is?
So, before we answer that question or attempt to answer that question, let's just get on the same page in terms of structure of it. Mm-hmm. So, the film, as it's structured, is a fictionalized account of I can't remember what the theological term for it is, but the ministry of Jesus, the last few years of his life before the crucifixion, begins with him as a carpenter. He, at least the way the film describes it, again, this is a fictionalized account of the Gospels. He goes out into the desert, comes to terms with what he must do. He's essentially fighting with God. Mm-hmm. And then he and Judas Iscariot get together and do the Jesus thing. He goes out in the desert and faces temptation for 40 days. He meets John the Baptist and gets baptized. He does the Sermon on the Mount. He does the turning of the tables at the temple, all the way up to the Garden of Gethsemane, Judas kissing him, down to the crucifixion. Stops at the crucifixion, the film does at least. However, while he's on the cross, for Bible nerds, after he says, they know not, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do, but before he says, it is finished. Because I think there's, 6 things Jesus said on the cross?
I know my brother has one of them tattooed on him.
That was a big Bible trivia question. Like, what are the 6 things Jesus said on the cross, you know? I am thirsty was one of them. Ow, oh, dad, ow, please make it stop, ow, it hurts, I think was one of them. In some translations, it's worded that way. In others, it's, why have you forsaken me? But, hey, translation, we'll talk about translation. But yeah, when this happens, he is greeted by his guardian angel, who says, Jesus, you've done it. You've proven that you can do it. I will ease the pain, come down from the cross, live a life, get married. And we watch a la the end of the Green Knight. He and Mary Magdalene get married. They go out, have a bunch of, or they try to have a kid, but then she gets killed by God. And then he ends up with Martha or Mary, sister of Martha, one of the M's.
Both of them. Both
of the M's, because he cheats on one with the other, but the little girl angel,
it's less
the guardian
cheating
angel,
and more polygamy.
The guardian angel is just like, women, they're all the same. There's only one woman. Go ahead. It's fine, Jesus.
Just minor sidebar here. I do think it's fascinating that in both of the movies where there's a flash forward into a life with a man who's supposed to be righteous, the woman he loves and who loves him gets fucked, metaphorically and literally.
Mm-hmm. Only the good die young, I think is also appropriate here. But yeah, he and Mary and Martha have a bunch of kids, and he starts growing old, and he runs into Paul, who is still preaching the gospel as you and I know it, even though Jesus is fine. And then in his deathbed, Judas comes to him and says, you fucking coward, you made me do the hard part, and you didn't even do your half of the bargain. And Jesus, as an old man, crawls back to Golgotha and expresses his wish to do it again, and we snap back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity, and Jesus is back on the cross. And he says it is accomplished or it is finished, and roll credits. Did the book add anything different or do that in any different way?
No, that's pretty much.
What I forgot to mention, I guess, is that in between the scenes of Jesus' life as we know them, there are scenes of him and Judas talking philosophy. Mm-hmm. And basically having the argument that later church leaders would have about the specific point of this, and that is, Jesus is 100% God and 100% man. And that's how I was taught it. And I think that's how it's generally taught in Christianity. Mm-hmm. How did that work during this time? What was his human side like? Because we're only ever shown the divine.
Yeah.
I've been talking. Talk. Say something. Bring your intelligence.
At the risk of blaspheming.
Oh, I have a quote for later.
At the risk of blaspheming while reading this novel, I believe my direct quote to you was, oh my fucking God, Jesus needs to get over himself.
Because the whole time he's struggling with, I think he knows at the very beginning that he has to get crucified. And I think that because the second thing we see of Jesus in the film, first thing we see is he has a migraine because God is just causing him pain.
Yes. God is a crow descending on his scalp.
Yes. And then the next thing we see is him building a cross for a man named Lazarus who's about to be crucified. And he tests it. He holds his arms against it to make sure the crossbar is the right width. And then he carries it and is ridiculed by his Jewish brethren for doing so. He carries it to the crucifixion site for Lazarus.
So in the novel, it's a little different. It's more... So first of all, the guy's not named Lazarus. The guy's just named the Zealot. And he's basically a stand-in for all of the false messiahs that have that everyone keeps pinning their hopes on, and then he just ends up dying. In this case, he's building the cross specifically because he's trying to make himself dirty. He wants to be sinful, so God will leave him alone. And he thinks that crucifying the prophets that God has supposedly sent, killing the messiahs, will make him so dirty that God will finally leave him alone. And clearly it hasn't worked yet.
Yeah. He does say something along those lines when explaining to Judas why. Mm-hmm. It just struck me as like, because he does say later, when he's meeting with that monk, that he still considers himself full of sin. He says, I lie. I don't tell people how I feel, which is something he considers lying, but is omission lying, you know?
Yeah.
So I like to believe that he knows from the beginning of the story what he must accomplish, and he builds up the passion and fervor to take steps, and the steps get bigger and closer, and then he keeps pulling back, and his human side keeps going, I want to live.
In the novel, it's, to go back to my aside earlier where I said that the women get fucked, this novel is very clearly using women as a metaphor for humanity, because, like, loving a woman, being connected with a woman, having sex, even lusting after a woman, even lusting with your eyes, is considered, like, an incredible sin. And so even though, like, Jesus has never had sex with a woman, he's a virgin, he considers himself almost not virginal because he touched the soles of his feet to Mary Magdalene's when they were fucking toddlers.
Is that what happened?
Yes.
They do not go into their childhood at all. They just... There's there's baggage here, you know?
Yeah, literally, she was 3 and he was 1, and they put the soles of their feet together, and that ruined her for the rest of life. And then when he was supposed to marry her, God basically descended on him, and he collapsed, and she took that as a rejection, and he took that as well, I'm not supposed to love anyone, and that's why she became a prostitute. Because her idea of repentance and salvation is she will open her body to the whole world, and that's how she will save everyone. So yeah, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of 1960s views of gender.
Ooh boy.
And there's the repeated motif, like Mary and Martha, when we get to them later, the repeated motif of, like, just being homemakers, and, like, the house and their yard is enough for them, and that's, like, tying them to the earth, literally and figuratively. You kind of see that a little bit more with Peter as well, because Peter and Philip don't want to leave their sheep, and then finally they do. And when you're talking about the men who follow Jesus, there's a lot of language around expansion and going, and the world not being big, the world they know not being big enough, and they need more than these 4 walls and more than what's in front of them. And all the people that are content with their lot in life are viewed as, like, the antagonists of the novel.
Interesting. Because something I gleaned from the film, and I think it was Peter Schrader. Is it Peter Schrader who wrote it?
I believe so.
I believe it was Schrader said that what he found interesting and what he was writing about is that the one thing Jesus actually wants, he cannot have, and it is to be human, and it is to live a human life. So it's interesting that the antagonists are people who are doing that, you know? And what he asks his apostles to do is to give up their human lives, because he doesn't even have the ability to have one.
Mm-hmm.
So in order for them to feel like him, they need to give up what he cannot have. And that's why the big betrayal at the end, where he essentially betrays Judas, is that he chooses to have that life anyway.
Yeah.
Or he's, depending on your viewpoint of if it actually happened, he is tempted to live that life anyway.
So pulling from the quote, or pulling from the essay, essentially, the note at the end of the novel written by the translator, because the novel was originally written in Greek and translated into English. In The Last Temptation of Christ, Jesus is a Superman, one who by force of will achieves a victory over matter, or in other words, is able, because of his allegiance to the life force within him, to transmute matter into spirit. But this overall victory is really a succession of particular triumphs as he frees himself from various forms of bondage: family, bodily pleasures, the state, fear of death. Freedom is not a reward for the struggle, but rather the very process of struggle itself.
That is an interesting quote.
Yeah, so basic, and that's the quote where I was saying earlier, heresy. This is heretical, especially in the 60s.
Yeah. It's funny because the movie was called Blasphemous.
Yes. This novel actually, when Kazantzakis died, he was actually denied his full burial rights. He should have been given a burial in state, but he was not given his full funereal rights as a Greek citizen. And the rights he was given were because other people in the world had started to come around on the novel.
Yeah. The film was called Blasphemous. And again, I think it was Schrader had a very funny line on the commentary track that he was on, where he said, like, oh yeah, it's definitely blasphemy. Like, using the figure of Jesus to explore humanity is blasphemous. But everyone who called it blasphemous said it's blasphemous because Jesus had sex. No, it's not. That's not what blasphemy is. Just like, you don't know what that word means.
Blasphemy is when your religion doesn't exactly match my religion.
Yeah. And like I said, we're everyone making this movie, writing this novel, us talking about it, are coming from different perspectives of this religion too. And I think the novel needed that blasphemy, that heresy to work, because it is a controversial subject of the humanity of Jesus. Like, it's none of those sects of Christianity consider his divinity to be up in the air, but how his human nature affected him, I believe, is a source of conflict within various sects of Christianity. So it's just interesting that different people from different branches of the faith can come to this novel and approach it the same way, because it's heretical at its base. It is blasphemous. It is, at the very least, irreverent.
So you mentioned earlier that you think that he's aware from the beginning, and that's where his suffering comes from, the fact that he's aware of what he has to do.
If I can elaborate on that.
Yeah.
It's similar to the story of Jonah and the whale, where Jonah knew where he needed to go to preach. Mm-hmm. And he said, I don't wanna, and got on a boat going the opposite direction. And God sent a storm. And when they threw him off the boat, God sent a whale. And he spent 3 days in the whale until he was like, okay, fine, I'll go. And then thrown up on the shore he needed to be at anyway, go preach. It's the same concept. Like, God's like, all right, Jesus, now's the time to start walking. I don't wanna. Headaches. Start walking, Jesus. You got stuff to do, son. Do your chores.
It kind of reminds me of the that old joke about the guy who's on his house in a flood, and you've got the guy on the rescue boat, and then the guy in the helicopter, and the guy in the whatever the third one is, and he's like, no, God will save me, and then he dies and goes to heaven, and he's like, what the hell, God, you didn't save me, and God's like, I sent you a boat and a ship and it's kind of like that. So my view from reading the novel, and only seeing bits and pieces of the movie as I was wandering around the apartment, is he doesn't know. He just knows that there's something. And he knows because of how he sees. The novel goes into detail on how Rome is crucifying Jews all the time. Just constantly, just like, you did something wrong, crucifixion.
Mm-hmm. It's always in the background.
Or crucifixion. Yeah, it's like the violence of the state against these marginalized people is everywhere, omnipotent all the time. Omnipresent, not omnipotent. And I think he doesn't necessarily know what he needs to do, but he knows when other people do this shit, they die horribly and painfully, and he is terrified. I
also partially read it as he doesn't know
the specifics.
Like, he knows what he must do, but he's very hopeful that it's not crucifixion. Like, even on Palm Sunday, when he's ready to burn the temple down and then freezes and doesn't do it, he says right there, he's like, please let this be quick. Just let this be quick. And then he can't even go through with it because it's not the right thing he has to do.
Yeah.
And it's so relatable.
Do you remember I would have been around 8th grade, so like 2005-ish,
Sure.
2004-ish. There was big ruckus in the writing community because Anne Rice, queen of the BDSM novel and vampire porn, I think her husband had recently passed away, and she had turned to religion, and she wrote a novel about Jesus as a young boy, specifically as like a teenage boy. And there was a massive uproar in the religious community because she was writing as though he was a 12-year-old boy who was like, I don't want to fucking be here. I'm bored. I want to go outside. I want to play with the fucking... I don't want to be writing with the scribes and teaching these people. I want to be doing fun stuff. And it was like a big deal in the religious community because, like we've been talking about, it's heretical. It's blasphemous to put the divine in the context of lame-ass humanity and write from the humanity point of view is not fun.
The thing is, the Jesus story is so unique, and every time it's told, it's so sanitized. It's so, whitewashed.
Literally, yes.
It's, like, literally and figuratively. And this is the only time I can think of that I was ever told the Jesus story in which it was set, like, in a proper historical context, too. Because, like you mentioned, like, there's that specter of everyone's getting crucified around in that Roman, hand. And, like, that's there, like, in a historical level in the Gospels.
Yeah.
But this was, like, the Gospels were also written, I think estimates are 50 to 80 years after the events. So it's also still kind of, it's like us talking about World War II, Like, there's some people still alive from the time that can tell some stories, but, like, some stuff's faded. But there's still a lot of, like, contemporary documentation and firsthand histories and stuff. But now, in the future, a lot of that historical context is lost.
So it's fascinating that you say that, because the end of the novel really deals with the idea of writers and writing things down and telling the story. So I'm going to pull from page 347. I don't speak in order for you to write, Matthew, Jesus answered bitterly. I say one thing, you write another, and those who read you understand still something else. I say cross, death, kingdom of heaven, God, and what do you understand? Each of you attaches his own suffering, interests, and desires to each of these sacred words, and my words disappear. My soul is lost. I can't stand it any longer. And earlier, when...
God, what a line.
When Jesus first discovers that Matthew is writing, Matthew talks about how there's this angel that comes down and wraps itself around him when he writes, and the angel's directing his pen. And there's a scene where the angel tells Matthew to write, Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and these 3 magi came to visit him, and he's like, I can't write that, that's not true. And the angel's like, fuck you, write it. And when Matthew tells him this story later, Jesus is like, that's not true. I've never been to Bethlehem. I don't know what that is.
The birth of Jesus is non-canon in the canon of this story?
In the canon of this story, that is made up, possibly by Satan. It is strongly...
Is the Immaculate Conception then also made up? Or did they not get into that in the novel?
So, no, it is not made up.
Okay.
What happens is basically, Joseph was already an old man, and Mary was like the young hotness, essentially. And when they went to get their engagement blessed on their wedding day, God struck Joseph down with lightning. So Joseph is essentially paralyzed for the entire story. And Mary is impregnated by an angel. Okay. Essentially. So the Immaculate Conception still happens, but there's a human cost attached to it. Like, Mary is an incredibly tragic figure. Her life is nothing but fucking suffering in this novel.
I feel like she got the short stick then, because she's in the film.
Yeah. And,
like, she has an incredible scene where it's the scene where she approaches Jesus and he says he doesn't recognize her.
Yeah.
And his only father is his father in heaven and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And she has to be consoled that there's angels behind him while he was speaking and all that.
Yes.
The actress whose name's escaping me who played Mary, Mother of Jesus, was trembling so hard that I think it was Harry Dean Stanton was just off camera holding her hand during the scene. Mm-hmm. It was either him or Harvey Keitel, just because she was just vibrating. And I think it might have been the screenwriter's wife that played her, actually. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, like none of like that background was in the film, which just adds so many layers to that scene in addition.
Yeah, like Mary shows up and you get... So something that's a little confusing about this novel, and not having read it in the original Greek because I don't speak Greek.
Why not? You didn't learn for the podcast?
No, I didn't. Sorry. I don't know how much of this is on the translator and how much of this is on the original story, but it jumps back and forth between points of view to the point that, like, there's times where you're not sure who's speaking. The bulk of it is still Jesus's point of view, but, like, you have big chunks from the point of view of Judas. You have chunks from fucking Barabbas. You've got chunks from Lazarus. You have sections that are from Martha and Mary, the eventual fake wives. You've got chunks from Mary Magdalene. There's chunks from Mary, mother of Jesus, the rabbi, the people at the monastery.
They needed to do, like, the words of Jesus in red.
For real. That would have been genuinely helpful. But the point of view shifts rapidly, and sometimes it's in one point of view and there's no break and you're in another point of view. Like, that happens a lot with Judas and Jesus, especially when they're talking. Mm-hmm. But Mary basically is like, she begins the novel and when you first go into her head, and she's like, my son's a fucking idiot. Everyone hates him, but he's all I have because my husband's a fucking invalid. I've never, like, she straight up is still a virgin. She's never had sex because her husband is incapable of it. And she's, like, talking to God, and she's like, why did you ruin my life just to give me this fucking useless piece of shit son who people are calling the crucifier? And then when she goes to bring him back after the Sermon on the Mount, she's just, like, sobbing because her whole life has just been miserable because everyone hates her and detests her because she was supposed to have this cool, beautiful life, and then she's got this shithead for a son who can't do anything right, and this husband who's just to feed twice a day until he says a word, and then he collapses into exhaustion. So even her life is like a half-life. Mm-hmm. I don't remember how I got on that tangent.
Talking about point of view. You mentioned Barabbas. He was the top Jewish leader in Jerusalem at the time, right?
So he's a criminal.
I only remember, this is going to sound so dumb. I only remember that name from singing it in one of the Easter cantatas at my church back in the day.
So there's...
Oh, he's the one that, like, we're going to crucify one of these guys. I think Barabbas walks free.
Yes, Barabbas walks free.
Because that's not in the film.
So in the story, Barabbas walks free, but his crime is killing Lazarus.
The first time or the second time?
The second time. He literally...
Well, double jeopardy.
He literally pulls Lazarus in half in the novel.
Okay, then he is in the film. Because we see Lazarus die the second time. Yeah,
like, he has no... That's where you get in his head. Because he's kind of haunted the narrative. Like, he's been trying to kill Jesus the whole time because of Jesus being the cross maker and the crucifier.
Is he the one who hired Judas to kill him towards the beginning?
Yes, it's that brotherhood.
Okay.
Judas actually outranks Barabbas.
I think he's just credited in the movie as Zealot.
Yeah, he might be. So, yeah, the scene where he's killing Lazarus the second time is fascinating. Because it's like, even though you've brought Lazarus back from the dead, it's very much that trope of, like, come back wrong. Because, like, Lazarus isn't really alive, and you're not sure whether that's because Jesus fucked it up and got scared, or whether you're just not supposed to bring people back from the dead. And so, like, when Barabbas is trying to kill him, it's described as, like, he tries to grab his throat, and it, like, he passes through him, and he tries to, like, he tries to stop him by grabbing his hair, but he pulls his hair and his whole scalp comes off, and it's just his skull is shining in the sun. And ultimately, the only way he can think to kill him is literally to rip him in half and bury the two halves. And it's not clear if Lazarus is still alive after that. Clearly he's not.
Haunting.
Yeah.
He just stabs him in the movie.
This book is gross. This book is smelly and greasy and full of blood and sweat and snot and mucus and...
Well, that's what happens when you buy it at a used bookstore.
Ha. For $1. Actually, this might have been one of the fucking free ones.
It was one we pulled off that shelf that was like dollar books or like 5 for $5 or whatever.
Yeah. It has a price tag of $1 on it, on the back.
We grabbed a bunch of future episodes that day.
We sure did. They're on the bottom.
But I digress.
Yeah, I was actually like, when I first started reading it, I'm pretty sure I told you, if this man talks about the sweaty Jews one more time, it's like, I get it. I understand you're trying to build an atmosphere, but it's kind of coming off as, like, in the modern era, 60 years removed, 70 years removed, it kind of just comes off as incredibly anti-Semitic.
Yeah, I was worried we were going to have a deeper conversation about anti-Semitism today.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to.
No, because it is very clearly a atmospheric thing. He's not saying it to be cruel.
Mm-hmm.
It's just he's trying to describe like how gross and filthy the world is.
Whereas the film, the characters happen to be Jewish, which is a persecuted class in the setting.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes no further than that. There's none of that modern Christian blame of Jews at the time for the crucifixion, which also always pissed me off. Like, we're going to blame Jews for killing Jesus. You wouldn't be here if the Jews didn't kill Jesus.
Like the whole...
But also, the Romans killed Jesus.
It's that, like, circular logic of we're Christians because we believe that Christ died for our sins, but also we hate the Jews because they killed Christ, and it's... But you can't have one without the other.
And that's something that I love that this story does, is because the other villain of the Jesus story is Judas. He's the betrayer, and he did it for 30 silver pieces. At least in the film, the silver pieces never come up.
Nope.
He does not kill himself in the future that we see.
Mm-hmm.
And he is Jesus' friend. And he does what he does because he has to.
Jesus specifically asks him to, and he says, you're the only one that can do this because the rest of my apostles are weak.
It's an incredible line in the movie when Jesus says, or Judas says, like, this is very difficult, and Jesus says, I know, that's why I gave you the hard part.
Yep.
You can do this. And it's such a moving scene because Judas doesn't want to do it. And it's what makes that ending so strong when he comes in and he's like, I did that and you didn't even follow up your side of the bargain. You had one job, Jesus.
Yep.
All you had to do was die.
Yep.
And you couldn't even do that. And it's so strong.
Yeah, like over and over again, when you're in Judas's head, he talks about how he's strong and he's from the desert and he's more powerful and he's capable of handling all this stuff. And you kind of get like the conversations that are being had between Judas and Jesus are the same conversations that Jesus is having with God.
Mm-hmm.
Because like Judas is like, do I have to do this? I don't want to do this. And Jesus is like, you have to. And then Jesus turns around in Gethsemane and is like, do I have to do this?
Which I loved at the end of the I don't want to drink what's in this cup bit. And then one of the apostles comes with a beverage for him and hands him the cup, and he has to physically drink the cup and accept it. It was just a wonderful piece of filmmaking.
Yeah, in that it's not one of the apostles. It's the angel descends with a literal. He's like, please take this cup away from me, and then an angel descends with a cup, and he's like, fuck.
He obviously doesn't really say fuck, right? But at least in the film version, a lot of the dialogue feels very modern. Was it the same in the novel?
It doesn't feel biblical, but it doesn't feel like modern as in 2026, but it does feel modern for the time. Which, that's actually one of the things that is rough about the novel. Like I said, it got him they tried to excommunicate him from the Greek Orthodox Church for this novel. It didn't succeed, obviously. But there's two, I'm pulling directly from the translator's notes at the end of the novel again. There's two modes of speech in Greek. You have demotic and puristic. Demotic would be what we consider common language. It would be kind of like in Roman Catholic Church, it would be like churches that do masses in English versus doing masses in Latin. So he wrote this in demotic, essentially Greek. So, like, the low, quote-unquote, lower class, more simple Greek.
Yeah.
And he kind of got heat from it from both people, from both sides. He got heat from the academics who were like, what the fuck is this? And he got heat from the lower class or demonic people who were like, what the fuck is this? Like, it's fascinating. He's almost like kind of stratified his own audience by trying to appeal to them. Oh, you also mentioned that it feels, setting it in its historical context. This novel was published in 1960 or maybe 55. I don't remember in that time frame. So like he was writing it when it felt like the world was ending to him.
Mm-hmm.
So he specifically wrote this trying to divorce the concept of Christ from Christianity as it existed, because he felt that the story was powerful enough to stand on its own, and he was kind of trying to create a new Jesus for the modern era. Because he was watching the Bolshevik Revolution fail. He was watching there was a minor revolution in Greece that failed. World War II happened.
World War II had just happened. I think Israel was being founded.
Yeah,
and
so he was like watching all of this happen, and he had experienced some suffering in his own life, basically, and so he was like, I want to create a Jesus that can stand on his own. And you can kind of see that in the story because it's Jesus separating himself from not only Rome, but also from teachings of Judaism to that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just interesting that, like, the movie is so set in the historical context, but there's also the context of when it was written, which still comes through in the movie.
Yeah, and also when the movie was made, there's some of that context there, too. Because, like, Scorsese went through great pains for historical accuracy. Actually, I believe it's between when the novel was written and when he made the movie, they found the only physical archaeological evidence of a crucifixion.
Yes.
There's a lot of written evidence, but the only physical evidence they found in a Jewish tomb circa this time. And it changed based on, they basically had a full skeleton of somebody they knew was crucified, and they knew because the nail that went through his heels hit a knot in the wood and curled around itself. So the heels had to be cut off and removed from the wood that way when the body had died, and then put in the grave with the rest of the bones. So between that and seeing how the heel bones lined up, and the way his legs were broken against the actual vertical beam of the cross, they were able to determine the position a body was most likely in on the cross, which is featured in the film.
Did you also get the, like, torture porn version of explaining crucifixion when you were in church?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, like, I was a teenager when Passion came out and watched that. Actually watched that on one of those missions trips in Brazil, which was weird. But there's that level of historical accuracy. There's the undercurrent of the occupation of Jerusalem by the Roman Empire, which I feel like is left out of a lot of tellings because that's not the important part.
Except it is.
And the only thing that's not historically accurate that Scorsese did was cast Willem Dafoe to play Jesus, a white guy. And he said he did that specifically because he wanted the audience to see the Jesus they're familiar with visually in the actual context that it happened in. And he points out on the commentary track that the Jesus story happened just in the streets. This was a guy, he was just a fucking dude. I mean, obviously he wasn't just a fucking dude.
Yes.
But he was a dude from a little town, and he just started talking to people in the streets. And that's why all the crowd scenes, there's only like 15, 20 people there. Because that's probably how many there were, and then the stories would spread. And that's got scriptural basis as well. And the way that they talk in the movie it's very Scorsese language without the cussing.
Yeah.
But, like, it's still very, like, these famous scenes. Let he among you who is without sin cast the first stone. Like, that's always spoken with reverence in those exact words, because that's what King James decided back in the day should be the way Jesus sounds. Because translation is a huge part of Christianity, whether you want to believe it or not.
Yeah.
But the way he does it in the film is he's like, come on. You think you're so clean? I know you're cheating your workers. What's the name of that widow you're sleeping? Judith. Yeah. Like, he stops the dude from stoning Magdalene, and he just talks to him like a person.
Yep.
And it's very low, like, low class. blue collar, for lack of a better term.
When the scene with Judas happens in the false reality, the dream world, you've got Judas yelling at Jesus, and he's like, "You're illiterate. You're like lower than dirt. You're a carpenter. How dare you? Like, how dare you have all these lofty ideas above your station and then make me commit to this betrayal and then you turn on me? Like, absolutely not." And like, he points out, you're nothing. You're literally illiterate. Like, there are people around you who are better educated than you are in every aspect. Why are you the one that gets to prescribe to us if you're gonna fucking fail the way you did?
And I think that's what makes this telling of the gospel so powerful, at least for me personally, is that you see this low-class guy, this illiterate guy, this carpenter, who's a bit whiny, doesn't want to do it, but he still goes through with it. And the fact that we're still talking about him 2,000 years later, and all this just really highlights that, like, how powerful, like, I don't know how I'm trying to say what I'm trying to say, you know what I mean? But, like, it's that dichotomy that the divine came out of basically the gutter, and the divine went through the worst humanity can offer, which is a torturous murder. And the way, at least in the film, that Pilate is described, or is depicted, of nonchalant about it. Like, he's like, "Oh, so what's your deal? Oh, you're one of those guys. Okay." Because, like, this was happening a lot. There were a lot of false messiahs at the time. Mm-hmm. And he's like, "Oh, you're another one of those, huh? So what did you do? Did you like tricks or anything? Like, what do you say to the people?" And he tells a parable. He's like, "Oh, that's cool." And he starts walking away. He's like, "I do still have to kill you, but see it." Like, he's just like real nonchalant about it. And it's all of that adds up to, like, this, I guess, mythical figure would be an apt term for Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Like, showing him in that light, and with the amongst the filth of the world. This film has nudity in it all over the place. You see Magdalene being, doing her daily work for hours while Jesus waits to speak with her. And it's dirty and everyone's just gross, and you could almost smell the movie coming off the screen, but it's still Jesus and it's still the divine. And that, like, just that's almost a better way to tell it than, "And he was born of a perfect baby, and he's just this perfect little white baby in a perfect manger, and the donkeys are like, 'Have an apple, son,' and the wise men come and give him gold, and then when he was 12, he taught, and look at him, he's so precocious, and now he's an adult, and he's doing miracles, and he's making wine, and he's healing the sick, and those big bad Jews and Romans came and hung him on a cross, but he's back now, and it's fine." Like, it's just...
It's almost the opposite of the Greek concept of, like, the god in the machine. It's the god out of the dirt.
Yeah.
Because, like, the Deus Ex Machina is literally a thing that was in Greek plays where they would resolve the issue with the god figure descending from above to solve whatever problem was happening. And this is the literal reversal of that.
Yeah, it's one of the characters accepts that he is God.
Yeah.
And solves the problem, which is us.
Fun fact, one of the only plays in which the Deus Ex Machina is a character in the play is Medea. Something that is different between the book and the movie is there are two scenes with Pilate. The first scene is basically what you described, where he's like, "So you do tricks, huh? All right, what kind of tricks do you do?" And Jesus is like, I don't do tricks." And Pilate is like, "Well, so part of the reason I summoned you here today is that my wife is like, she wants me to tell you to leave because she's worried that you're going to get hurt." And Jesus is like, "I can't leave. I'm stuck here." And Pilate is like, "All right, whatever. Like, do your do." And then later, when he does have to kill him, he's mad. He doesn't want to kill him because he doesn't want to give the Jews another martyr. But then you get that scene where they're basically baying for Jesus's blood because he's not following, he's creating his own law and he's blaspheming against the existing law. And that's where you get the kind of, like, Pilate is, like, uncomfortable, and that's where you get the washing his hands of it. He's like, "I don't give a shit."
I am glad that scene is not in the movie, because that event is the source of a lot of anti-Semitism among Christians, and not including it in the movie means it's not a conversation that needed to have happened.
Yeah.
I
like the idea of, I really like what Nikos Kazantzakis is saying with that scene, where essentially Pilate represents Rome, and he's like, bro, look around you. I've murdered 3,000 other messiahs this week. What makes you different? What makes you different is that people are talking about you, and I don't want them to talk about you, and the only way I can get them not to talk about you is if you shut the fuck up and leave and stop doing this. And I don't want to give them your head on a spike, because then they're going to keep talking about you.
Yeah, that is an important element of this as well.
Yeah.
Which I wish was a little clearer in the film. But it's kind of there in that scene towards the end when old man Jesus runs into Paul, and Paul is preaching the gospel as it's written. And he's like, why are you lying? That didn't happen. And Paul's like, it doesn't matter what you say. You can be Jesus. I don't care. The resurrected Jesus is the one that's going to save us. The resurrected Jesus is the one people care about. And there was an earlier scene as well with a poignant line for that moment, which was the apostles were discussing what John the Baptist said to Jesus.
Yes. And
one of them claims it was, I can't remember what it was, but it was something. And is responded with, how do you know he said it? Well, even if he didn't say it, the words are still important. Well, why? Because people believe them.
Quote from Paul, I won't keep quiet. I don't give a hoot about what's true and what's false, or whether I saw him or didn't see him, or whether he was crucified or wasn't crucified. I create the truth. Create it out of obstinacy and longing and faith. I don't struggle to find it, I build it. I build it taller than man, and thus I make man grow. If the world is to be saved, it is necessary, do you hear, absolutely necessary for you to be crucified, and I shall crucify you like it or not. It is necessary for you to be resurrected, and I shall resurrect you like it or not. For all I care about, you can sit here in your miserable village and manufacture cradles, troughs, and children. And then later, I shall become your apostle whether you like it or not. I shall construct you and your life and your teachings and your crucifixion and resurrection just as I wish. Joseph the carpenter of Nazareth did not beget you. I begot you. I, Paul the scribe from Tarsus.
And Paul created Fox News with that speech.
Pretty much. It sure does sound familiar.
Which leads me to a conspiracy theory I have.
Oh?
So this movie was boycotted by various religious organizations. And it's not the first time that's happened to a film we've talked about. It happened with The Exorcist. I think it happened with, what was the other one that got, I can't remember I think there was another one that got protested as well. But not only did this get boycotted, a theater in Paris got bombed during a showing, injuring 13 people. Scorsese had multiple death threats and needed private security for over a year after it came out. And Blockbuster Video refused to carry it.
Huh. Okay.
And one of the filmmakers, it might have been Jay Cox, might have been Schrader, one of them on the commentary said that what they found interesting was all these organizations put out these things of how blasphemous the movie is, and I already said the thing earlier where, it is, but not in the way they're saying. But not one criticism of the film from a religious organization came without a call for funding. Every single Christian org hopped on a bandwagon of, you can't watch that, it's the devil. To help us fight the devil, please send a check or money order to. And oh god, we still see that now. It happened recently with that shitty fucking Angel Studios movie. The one about the child sex trafficking that was made by a child sex trafficker.
Caviezel?
Was he in it? Was it
the
Sound of Thunder? No, Sound of Thunder's a way different movie. What's that fucking called? Sound of Silence?
Something like that.
Whatever that was called. They had that Pay It Forward program where you could buy multiple tickets to future showings that would be given. Except no one is ever quite sure who gave those tickets out to whom. And that just, boosted box office numbers for a lot of empty showings. But
didn't they also, weren't there a lot of sexual assault and domestic violence advocacy groups that were like, this is bullshit?
Yeah. Actual survivors, of some of these. Because I think there's real world people who were saved by, or whose saving was claimed to have happened by that org.
Yeah.
But it was really local people and they hopped in at the last minute and took credit. That kind of shit was happening.
Yeah.
But and while yes, funding is absolutely a reason why a lot of these groups were vocal to boycott, I think there's other reasons why they may not have wanted people to see this movie. And it's A, It's a very good reminder that Jesus was disrupting the status quo and defying authority.
Yep.
And that is an important element of Jesus that gets lost in almost every telling of his story.
There's a very flippant Tumblr post that's like, hey, when people tell you to be like Jesus, just remember that braiding a whip and flipping tables is not off of the table.
Yeah. He comes into the temple and he's like, what are you doing in my father's house? Or, we came here to worship. Though the scene he has, I'm not sure if he has the scene in the book with the money changer. Mm-mm. And he's like, how are your exchange rates, pal? Fine. They're always fine at this stall. Oh, yeah? And how are your profits today? Fine. And, like, that's, like, his little smirk and the fine, and that's when he fucking snaps. But, like, even beyond that was, like, the Jews, the oppressed group, was looking for him not as a religious savior. They were looking at him to save them here and now.
Yep.
We want to get out of the thumb of Rome.
That's like why Judas starts entering Jesus's orbit, because he's like, you need to save the body first. And Jesus is like, no, you need to understand that hating the Romans isn't going to make it better. And that's why, like, when Jesus heals the Roman centurion's daughter, Judas is like, what the fuck? You can't heal the Jews, but you're healing this person? And Jesus is like, it's a little girl. Yeah. Like, what do you want?
But, like, I'm just thinking that these religious organizations that are seeking power especially in the late 80s, which is when a lot of what we're seeing now in this country, a lot of the Christofascism, a lot of the Christian nationalism started in the 80s. Mm-hmm. So a lot of these organizations are trying to rise to power, and they don't want a story where Jesus is challenging authority, because they will be the authority soon. Mm-hmm. At least in their minds. They don't want to tell someone who's poor and has nothing and comes from nothing that he could rise up, and through the power of just love and caring for your neighbor, which, let's not forget, when Jesus was asked, and I'm kind of disappointed this scene's not in the movie, but it's fine. When Jesus was asked what the most important commandment is, he says, love God. What's the second most? Love your neighbor. He starts with love. There's time for anger. There's time for righteous anger, but he always leads with love. Mm-hmm. And that is a powerful thing in this day and age, when especially people who claim to be Christians preach hate from the pulpit. And there are communities that we belong to, and we're called demons. Even just being on the left, you're a demon-crat. You know, like...
Yep.
That's not what Jesus told us to do. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I had a second point in my little conspiracy theory here as to why they were blocking it. But that's basically it.
I was going to say, I thought the conspiracy theory you were going to put up is this is the only biblical movie that involves Christ where there weren't, like, horrible accidents. I
mean, there is a running theory that if you play Jesus, your career is cursed. And Defoe was like, mine wasn't. I was kind of fine, actually. He apparently ran into Max von Sydow, who played Jesus in one of the early epics. Defoe didn't even know. 10
Commandments, I think?
Wasn't that Charlton Heston? No, 10 Commandments was 10 Commandments, did that even go to Jesus? I don't know. Who played Jesus in Ben-Hur? But I think he said greatest story ever told might have been von Sydow.
That sounds right.
But, like, apparently Von Sydow came up to Defoe after the film came out and was like, welcome to the party, or, like, welcome to the club, something like that. But, yeah, there weren't, like, crazy accidents on set. There was some cursing on the production. Scorsese was supposed to make it in 83 under Paramount. Mm-hmm. And then they pulled the plug because the budget got too high. But they had already cast almost everybody. And then it was 87 that he got funding, about half of what he originally wanted. So instead of shooting in Israel, they shot in Morocco. They used a lot of local extras, which also gives this movie, like, a really, like... Again, it adds to the historical realism that there are so many people of different skin tones and hairstyles and different ethnic backgrounds, as there would have been in a place like Jerusalem at the time. Like, North Africa's not that far from the Middle East, and it's a lot of, like, similar-looking people.
That's something you get in a lot of complaints about movies that are, like, Greek myths. As soon as you cast someone who's not white, they're like, what the fuck? But it's like, have you seen
a Greek person?
Exactly. Like, have you seen a Greek person? And also, some of these take place in Africa. Like, come on, guys.
Yeah, like, for real. They're not that far away. The Mediterranean's not as big as the Atlantic. Like, let's be real.
Yeah.
But yeah, they shot in Morocco to save money. And they just went and fucking made the movie. And it was a hard shoot, but they didn't run into any major bumps and bruises or anything like that. Defoe wasn't struck by lightning on the cross. The only thing that happened is, like I mentioned earlier, I think it was the film negative got exposed to the sun on what became the last shot of the movie, and he kept the burning of the film negative in the picture, which is a reminder that what you're watching is fabricated, it's a work of fiction, but also B, really visually interesting for the moment.
Yeah.
Of Jesus' death, like the world ceases to exist when he dies. Like it's really interesting choice to leave that in, and it opens up a lot of cool interpretation. When they went back in '87 to make it, they used 90% of their original cast. Barbara Hershey, Harry Dean Stanton, Harvey Keitel were all cast for '83. The only one they needed to cast was Defoe.
I was going to say, wasn't Barbara Hershey the one who introduced the book to Scorsese?
Yeah, it was on the set of Boxcar Bertha, which was on our Circle of Scorsese.
It was.
It was during that shoot she gave him the novel, and it took him a while to read it and a while more to make it.
I sympathize.
David Bowie plays Pontius Pilate. It was originally going to be Sting. And who was... De Niro was an option for Jesus as well. And that would have been a very different movie. I think Defoe was perfect.
I would have understood Jesus with a sword if it were De Niro. But also, didn't De Niro have like a pithy quote about why it doesn't work for him? Or why he wouldn't have worked in the role?
Probably, but I can't remember what it is if he did. But no, I think Defoe is perfect. And in Defoe's own words, he was like, I'm the only one that can play this part. And I think it's because he's always been like quiet about his beliefs. At least at the time of the commentary I listened to, which was recorded on Holy Saturday in 1997 for the Criterion release. I don't even think he mentioned then. He was like, yeah, people don't know what my belief system is, and I think that kind of works. Because like Scorsese's Catholic, but I just read the script and knew like, yeah, I don't know of any other actor that can play this. It has to be me. Like he just kind of had that very Jesus-y moment of this is meant to be, I better do it. And then when you think about the crucifixion shooting that scene, and it's full body shots, and it's historically accurate. I mean, they didn't drive nails through him. They had metal U-bars, hard fastened to the wood that his arms and ankles were through, and then a fake facade of the plank with the nail over that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they would put him up on a cross, and you get in a full body shot. You can't fake that. You just can't. Like there are shots of his feet alone where like, yeah, he's fine. But Willem Dafoe out there from first ray of light in the morning to last ray of light in the evening, hanging on a cross. Thank God they shot in November and the days were shorter. But they used every bit of sunlight they could to get as many shots as they could. And Scorsese shot this as fast as he could because he didn't have the budget to do it otherwise.
I think in the commentary you were listening to, there was a point where Defoe was saying it was almost like a satire or a farce where they would be wrapping up a scene and he'd be like, all right, guys, we gotta run. We gotta go get the guy with the pig. And they would like have to run down a hill and get to the next scene.
Yeah. Like a lot of Jesus and his disciples in costume walking in the part, like close enough to the part of the world where it actually happened. I think one of his first days was the desert, Temptation in the Desert, and it was a long shot walking through like this rocky plain. Mm-hmm. And he was told right before the shot, just careful when you kick those rocks, some of them might have scorpions underneath. just out there in the fucking trenches shooting a movie. And it's just because they
make movies.
They were just passionate about the story.
Do we want to talk about the elephant in the room at all?
If you're referring to the elephant trunk length penis of Willem Dafoe?
Yes.
So this isn't the movie where you see his frightening dong. However, that shot I was referring to when he's walking across the plain, he's in a very white, full body. You see that thang is swinging, and that is a thang. That is a swinging. And then when he's getting whipped before the crucifixion, you see a tip near his knees.
Willem Dafoe is, I think, the only actor who has a notorious rumor about the size of his dick.
It's not a rumor. There's that production still on the DVD where it's, again, he's naked in the crucifixion scene and he's got a harsh sidelight on him. His hands are bound and covering his junk, but you see a perfect shadow of it hanging on his leg, and it is horrifying.
I was gonna say, I believe you, in the sex scene, you were like, man, I've seen what you're working with. You're gonna tear her in half.
He's gonna perforate her. Apparently, on the dark side of making movies, Barbara Hershey, who played Mary Magdalene, chose to do her own nudity. Mm-hmm. Quote, because it made her feel like a whore. End quote.
Sure.
Fair. Whatever gets you into the mindset of the character, as long as you're doing it consensually.
I mean, it is the 80s.
As long as you're doing it consensually. Now, some of the Moroccan extras did not fully understand what was happening when they were making the movie, and got a little too close to Barbara Hershey, if you catch my drift. I don't think anything, like, really untoward happened, but some lines were approached, if not crossed.
Got it.
Which is disappointing to hear. But yeah, they were definitely worried during a lot of this shoot, like the John the Baptist scene, because there's a lot of nudity in that scene as well. Mm-hmm. And that is not a thing in an Islamic country.
Yep,
especially when it's women.
Yep.
And yeah, they were like, if the authorities had shown up, we would have been in trouble. Like, the movie would not have been finished. Trouble. Like, yeah. I think the only other note I have is Jay Cox, he wasn't the credited screenwriter, but he rewrote a lot of dialogue.
He was the
Carrie
Fisher.
Yeah, he was. I mean, I'm pretty sure he said he and Scorsese were like best friends. And I know I've said his name on this podcast before during that season. So he was the on-set screenwriter, because Schrader had moved on to other things. And he went to opening night in New York City. And this wasn't an industry premiere. This was a public opening night. And there were protesters out and whatnot. Packed theater. And when the credits rolled, he said this is the only time he had ever seen this in a non-industry event. People stood and clapped. And on his way out of the theater, local media was there, news crews, papers, interviewing people. And you could tell the reporters were not happy, that people were like, I thought it was a great movie. I loved the movie. Like, people, they weren't getting the anger they were expecting to get, or like the heresy and all that. And he went home and he called Scorsese and said, hey, they stood and clapped. And he had to repeat it 6, 7, 8 times before it sunk in that movie was loved by its audience. And I think that's neat. That, like, and I think Scorsese even said, like, hearing that made the year of private security and bomb threats and all that shit almost worth it. Like, to have told a story that successfully. Anything you wanted to say more?
No.
So do you recommend this book?
Deep sigh. It's not difficult to read. Like, the language itself is not difficult. And it's not dense in the way that, like, the detective was dense. I didn't enjoy it while I was reading it, but I don't think it's a bad book. It definitely made me think about the Passion story differently, and I think that's worthwhile.
Which, like you said, was kind of his goal. Yeah.
So, I think the author succeeded. I don't think I would have chosen to read this book on my own. So, I'm gonna say it's a 3 out of 5. It's a good book, and it succeeds at what it set out to do, but I didn't have a good time reading it.
Reasonable.
What about the movie? Do you recommend the movie?
Well, it's tough. For me personally, because I've explained my upbringing. Mm-hmm. And I've spent the last 10 years or so trying to, undo the shackles that come with, the panopticon of growing up in that society, so to speak. And it's been hard. Like, even just coming out of the closet to myself took years. And it's still stuff I'm working on, like, still accepting my faults. Because from a younger age than I can remember, I was raised to be like Christ. Mm-hmm. And that, was taught to me as perfection. I was raised to be perfect.
Surely that won't do any damage to a young child's psyche.
No, not at all, especially if he's autistic and takes everything literally. So with that context, for me personally, this is an incredibly powerful movie. Because I was able to empathize with Jesus in a way I hadn't been able to before while watching this. Because he also grew up struggling with knowing what he must do to be perfect. And how difficult that is. And I know how difficult that is. And I can imagine just enough of what he was going through to know that it was so much worse. And this telling of it just really speaks to me in that way and reminds me that, like, I am human. I'm allowed to fall into temptation because what else can I do? I am human. I'm not expected to do what Jesus did. However, in the situation I'm in, which day by day comes closer and closer to being, you know, a marginalized member of a society as the Christo-fascists keep taking over, how do we accomplish, like, overcoming that? Through love. And that's been, like, over the summer with the No Kings protests and stuff, that's what we've been seeing, is love is leading. And we're seeing less violence and more love as the forefront of that. And there's a time for violence. 2020 was a time for violence. Mm-hmm. And by violence, I mean, you know, buildings and things that aren't people.
Yeah.
Officers. So, I guess what I'm saying is, like, I know I can't be Jesus, but the whole goal of being a Christian is to be like Jesus. And it's important to remember that Jesus came from nothing. And he had no advantages. And literally changed the world by preaching love. And yes, over the centuries, that message has been co-opted by, you know, leadership. We had crusades. We have, you know, modern times. I don't need to go into much more detail, but, like, that message is still there and still strong and still worthwhile. And this movie is a very good reminder of that. All of that said, it's 2 hours and 45 minutes long. It's about Jesus, and it's about Jesus in a glowing light, which will be a turnoff for a lot of people. And the people that, a movie about Jesus won't be a turnoff for, the nudity and violence will. Well, maybe not the violence, because those people will throw on Passion of the Christ just to, you know, fucking watch it. But I think those are important elements to the story and important reminders, and we can be adults about this and still glean something from it. So I guess I do recommend the movie. I think it's a masterpiece. Is it Scorsese's best? No. I think Wolf of Wall Street's more watchable. I actually watched that today, even though it's 15 minutes longer. And, like, fucking Goodfellas is incredible as well. I really like After Hours. There are other movies of his I will go to first, but this is still an incredible work of filmmaking. Just knowing what they had to go through to do it. Defoe's incredible. Bowie just being nonchalant in his one scene steals it. Harvey Keitel, barely talked about him. Incredible as Judas. Barbara Hershey's great. Harry Dean Stanton, he's only in 2 scenes, but he sticks out as Paul. Yeah, I guess I recommend it. Or at least watch, like, scenes from it to, like, get a vibe of it before you watch the whole thing. Yeah.
Remember, kids, sin, or Jesus died for nothing.
So it's theorized.
Are you about to make the plastic rope joke?
I like how I said 3 words and you knew exactly what Tumblr post I was referring to.
Yep.
I'm just going to leave it at that. If you know, you know.
What were you doing at the Devil's Sacrament?
Yeah. So that was a fun thing to do right after Easter.
Yep, sure was. We didn't even get... The book doesn't even touch on the fun part.
Yeah, it doesn't even get to the Easter part. It just stops at Good Friday.
What's the Scorsese quote? It's a lot of Good Friday and not a lot of Easter.
Yeah.
Too much Good Friday and not enough Easter.
Yeah, his movies were described as too much Good Friday and not enough Easter, and then he went and made a movie about Good Friday.
Yep.
What a great filmmaker. I'm gonna be so sad when he's done, because I think he's only got one left in him. He's over 80.
I was gonna say, who's gonna die first, him or one of his favorite actors? It's a race between him, De Niro, and Pacino.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad they did The Irishman. Got them together again, made movies like the 70s again, and they loved that. Check that episode out. But I guess we need to decide on what we're doing next.
Yeah.
And, we're getting into the springtime. School's winding up. And it's an easy well to dip back into is shit we had to read in school. And there was a lot of shit we had to read in school, and some of which I didn't understand. So, our next 4 episodes is a season tentatively called Things I Had to Read in School But Didn't Understand.
I mean, hey, we could even go a little more broader and include this one and just be stuff the general public doesn't understand, even though most of them have read it.
I was gonna say, because, we would have had to do Passion of the Christ and read the Gospels for that.
Yeah,
to fit in. Because ain't nobody read this. This was not taught in schools. I read C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters in school. I did not read Last Temptation. Although if a teacher had handed me that, it probably would have changed my life for the better at a much younger age. I'm not even joking.
I feel like your parents would have had issues with it.
They would have had issues with it, for sure. But if I would have read it at that age, different person. But what I didn't read in school, but which is probably misunderstood. Actually, I could probably link this better. So, the Christo-fascists are taking over, and they don't want us to see and read materials that are subversive. And I have a feeling we're going to get back to times of burning books.
We've already read 1984. What could you be talking about?
The specific act of burning books. When paper, the only thing I know about this book is that paper needs to be 451 degrees Fahrenheit to burn. So therefore, next time out, we're going to do, it's Ray Bradbury, right?
Yes.
We're going to do Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451.
So I know that you said books that we've read in school. I managed to make it through my entire American high school education and never read this book.
I also didn't read it, but I know kids in my school that did.
Yes, it was assigned
and
for...
All four we're doing in this season were assigned at least to students that I knew while I was in high school. So we're going to read the book by Ray Bradbury, and we're going to watch the film. And I'm not 100% sure which film I'm going to watch. There's one in 1966, starring Julie Christie, Oscar Werner, and Cyril Cusack. And then there was one from 2018, starring Michael B. Jordan, Michael Shannon, Condi Alexander, Lily Singh.
We do love Lily Singh.
We see her every weekend at BMO.
Close personal friend Lily Singh.
Oh, we fucking just met Joy Fawcett in line to get into BMO. That happened.
Yeah, that was a thing.
That was cool. Hi, legend.
I mean, honestly, I feel like you could probably get away with watching both of them. It'll still be shorter than this movie.
Actually, 112 minutes and 101 minutes. Close, yeah. So, yeah, I'm going to watch both, I guess. So, yeah, next time out, Fahrenheit 451. But until then, you can check the description for our link tree, which includes our social media accounts, a Spotify playlist we did when we did Perks of Being a Wallflower, our email address if you want to send me thoughts, complaints, theological debates. We also have our Ko-fi account, however you pronounce that, ko-fi/soonmajorpod if you want to toss a couple of dollars our way, keep the podcast on the air. And you can also check out our other show, The Treatment, a podcast about stories. Our most recent episode is our retelling of King Midas, told from the perspective of his daughter, and is also the Godfather.
We accidentally did a Scorsese.
Oops. Which I really liked that story, what we did. It came out really good.
It was fun.
So check that out wherever you get your podcasts. And, oh god, this episode's going to be as long as the fucking movie. If I keep going. Bye.